Do you ever get a knitting idea stuck in your head that just won't disappear? That was me on our recent getaway to Switzerland. Being up in the mountains hiking made me once more appreciate the hiking jumpers I've knit over the years. Sturdy cotton things that can just be thrown in the washing machine and sometimes even the dryer. There's nothing better than a jumper that will protect you from the wind, but not make you overheat when you're exercising. We were going to go away for a longer time again soon, and I knew I really wanted to make another hiking jumper for that trip specifically. I also already had the perfect pattern in mind, the Seleste jumper by Sari Nordlund. This is a worsted weight jumper with a beautiful bubble lace circular joke. The only catch? I had just 2 weeks to knit it, lace and all. Could I pull it off? Grab a cozy cup of something warm and join me as we journey from the highest mountaintops in Switzerland to the windswept cliffs of Ireland. I started knitting this jumper while on the Schildhorn, an almost 3,000-meter high mountain in Switzerland. That is, according to my calculator, like 9,800 feet for anyone who uses that instead. And this mountain is home to the famous rotating restaurant Piz Gloria that was featured in a James Bond movie. I always love knitting in memorable places, and it makes me smile to now look back at this video of me hanging out with Matt knitting on top of a mountain. While we were in Switzerland and the days after, I barely had time to really keep knitting though, so it in the end came really down to the last few days I had before leaving again. And here is a little diary on how that went. Good morning and welcome to Speed Knitting 101. So I'm trying to get this done before the trip, and I've been knitting a lot on it. I'm making my way through the lace yoke as quickly as possible, but I'm not sure. I kind of gave myself time until like in 2 days to finish the lace yoke, because then I think I'll have a shot at actually finishing the jumper, but there's still a long way to go. Update a few hours later, it's growing, and I've now made myself a kind of plan on where I need to get to any given day to make it on time, hopefully. Here's a little Wednesday afternoon update. So it's not quite at the stage yet where I could start the ribbing, but it's not far off. I think we have a chance. Maybe I'm kind of telling myself that, but I feel like so far kind of looking good. I also see myself blocking it a tiny bit lengthwise so it sits more nicely either way. And then yeah, we're almost ready for ribbing. Last possible day to finish this, and we're on sleeve 2. We're getting there. We're gonna get it done. Hello and welcome back to the Down the Forest Path Knitting Podcast. I am Nicola. I'm the host and moderator of this podcast. I don't know how much I already told you in the intro, because at this point where I'm filming this, I haven't made it yet, but I guess I already said that I did manage to finish the sweater at time, and you can see that I am also wearing it. I hope you have something nice and warm to drink. I do. I have this mug of Empress Grey tea that I brought back from the UK. Empress Grey is basically like Earl Grey, just a little bit more citrusy than that, so I really love it, and you can't get it in Germany, so this is not my first cup of this today. And I've had my regular dose of coffee as well. I might be a little bit hyper, I hope you can't tell, but let's get right into it and talk about this sweater. So as I already said, this is the Seleste sweater by Sari Nordlund. Sari also has a YouTube channel, it's called Sari Knits, where she talks about her designs and what she's making. I always really like her videos. I think the last one was a while ago. I don't know if she's still making them, but I find them quite educational, and she talks a lot about her design process and things like that. So if you're interested in that at all, then I would say check out her channel as well. Now, this sweater I really loved making. I have made, that was my jar of my mug of tea. I've made one of Sari's designs before, and that was the Kuta tea. That is for summer. I have it here. And as you can see, the beautiful lace is kind of the modus operandi for Sari. This also has a really beautiful lace yoke. It's also a circular yoke sweater, in this case a tee, that goes right down. So it's a very nice construction. I do love circular yoke sweaters because I think they're quite easy to knit from a construction viewpoint, and then you can just really focus on the lace or whatever other construction details it has, like collar work for example, and I find that makes it stand out really nicely as well. And the same is also true for the Seleste. So you can see it has this really nice structural lace. I know I say structural a little bit too often, but forgive me. I just don't know how else to describe it when it has these really straight columns running down of center decreases, and then this kind of crescenty bobble pattern that increases in size the further down along the sweater you go. So as you can see, this is a ton of bubbles. There's so many bubbles in the sweater. I don't know how many. I didn't count them. I could calculate it out with the pattern, but I did not. But I would guess it's at least 300, if not more. And that's also kind of what almost broke this project's back for me, because the bubbles were just really hard on my wrists to make. I don't know if that's a very well-known problem or if like lots of other people have the same issues, but for me, bubbles just kind of, and I only realized this now in this project. I've done bubble projects before, and I did them slower, so it wasn't such an issue, but for me the bubbles really made my wrist hurt after a while, so I took breaks from knitting this, even though I didn't really have that much time. The way the bubbles are constructed in this is really simple. You do not have to turn the work. I know there are some bubble construction methods that make you do wrong sides to resolve the bubbles. This one doesn't, so you're just making right sides, which is really simple and really nice. I think the lace is beautiful. I just fell in love with it the first time I saw the picture that Sari had put as a project picture on the pattern page, and I knew I wanted to make it, and so the opportunity to make this as my hiking jumper was an immediate yes for me, but it might be a while until I do another project with bubbles after finishing this. The sweater is knit in worsted weight, so it is decently quick, but because my gauge was a little bit off, I knitted on quite small needles, so then it took its time anyway. I found the pattern really well written. The lace is charted and also written out, so you have both available to you. I would recommend using the charted version because it makes it really easy to see where which stitch should be in relation to the row before. It helped me out in this pattern quite a lot on a few occasions. I think if I'd just gone by the charted version, there would have been mistakes in it, and this way I managed to do it kind of accident free. I'm really happy with it. It also has no short rows. That was like the one kind of a little bit more negative point of the pattern for me. I think it's because the yoke is quite deep, so you don't really know where you should put short rows in it without it looking off, and it made it probably quite hard. But as you can see, the neckline is a little bit deep. because of that. And oops, sorry for kicking you. I didn't mean to. Let me put this back. Yeah, so as you can see, the neckline is a little bit deep on the back because of it, and it kind of pulls backwards a little, but it's not too bad because it's not super tight up here anyway, so it's not really an issue for me. But if you do like something that has a kind of like higher back, then you might want to think about a way to incorporate short rows in making this. I also did a few mods with this. I made mine a little bit more cropped than the pattern was. Can you hear this? I made mine a little bit more cropped than the pattern was, and my sleeves are also shorter. That is because this is a hiking sweater for me, and so it's easier when the sleeves are not super long, and it also means that my Apple Watch registers the amount of time I spent in daylight because it doesn't cover it, which I also like to keep track of. So that was just more practical for me. And they're scratching at the door. He doesn't, oh, he's crying. He doesn't usually do this. He just does it when I'm in here and talking because he's hearing me talking. Let me get him. He's been escorted to his designated scratching area, which is basically behind the camera, and as long as he's being good, he's allowed to stay there. So let's keep going. So yeah, my sleeves are a little bit shorter than the pattern says, and additionally the pattern suggests you have a folded collar, and I did not do this either because I wanted this to be a hiking sweater. So let's maybe talk about what I found. He was doing a little bit of criminal activity down there, so he's now up here. What I found makes sense in general for an exercise sweater, because I do wear hiking sweaters quite a lot. I go on quite long hikes. I go up to sometimes like 25 kilometers, and there are a few jumpers I keep wearing because I just find that they're ideal coverage, and especially spring and autumn. And there's others where I found that it's just too much for me. I'm someone who overheats quite easily. I'm always running a little bit hot. So I found for me that it makes most sense to use yarns that are primarily made from cotton or linen. I find that they're like really protective against wind if you knit them at the right gauge, but they are not going to really heat you up. So even in like warmer weather, I can still wear a hiking jumper that's made from cotton. I also find that garments that are made from cotton and linen are easier to clean in a more industrial way, so using a washing machine or even a tumble dryer. Of course, you should always follow the recommendations that are listed on the yarn that you're purchasing, but for me, I tend to go for yarns that I can put in the washer for exercise clothes, because I don't like re-wearing clothes that I've sweat in. I just like, at least not to the degree that I do when I'm going up a mountain or something like that. I found that it makes me feel a little bit gross, so I like just exercising, going on a long hike, and afterwards chucking everything that I wore in the washer and washing it. So for me, that's two key points of it. And then I started the segment by saying I didn't do the double collar. That's the third point I found. If I make exercise clothes, I do not want one area of them to be much thicker than the rest. So if you do a double collar, of course, the fabric is kind of doubled up in that place, and it's double the thickness. And that means that if you're exercising in it, then at least for me, that tends to make me overheat quite a lot if I wear a garment where one part of it is much thicker than the rest. So those are the things that I found with making clothes for hiking. And that's also why I chose the yarn that I chose. And let me just get a ball of it so I can show you in more detail what my thinking there was. Here we have the tiny bit of yarn I have left. This is Drops Belle. And this is a blend of cotton and I think viscose and linen. So this is quite a breathable yarn, and it's made of different strands. I think you can see that, but let me also just break up the end of it so you get a better look. And I think each strand is made from a different material, and that's how the yarn has that like fiber content, because they're also different, slightly different colors, so you can see that it takes the dye a little bit differently depending on which fiber it is. Here I think you can kind of get an idea. So you see that there's like one strand, for example, that's just a little bit darker, and that's kind of causing this hazard effect, which I like because I feel like it gives the sweater in itself a bit more depth, a bit more color dimension, and I really like that look and that optic. So I love this yarn in general. It's also extremely cheap. It's very cheap. I think I paid like €1.70 per 50 grams or something. So that's like £1.50 in the UK or something like that, and like $1.80 or I don't know, but it's like under 2 for each currency, I think. So the sweater overall cost me something like €15, which is incredibly cheap. I could not buy a sweater like this for €15 easily, so I'm really happy with that aspect of it. It also makes this really easy to care for, because it doesn't have wool content, it doesn't felt, and it's, for me, I put this in the washing machine. I don't know if you're recommended to put it in the washing machine, so please, if you're intending to, look it up before. But for me, I have several hiking jumpers that are made from Drops Belle because it's so easy to care for and because I can clean it very easily. And even though it's made of these separate strands, I find it's not super splitty. I do really like it, and because the kind of different strands are quite wrapped up, I find that I tend to not split it much, so I can even look away when I'm knitting with it, which is nice because it's driving me mad when I can't because the yarn is too splitty. And with this one, it's generally not a problem for me. It almost looks braided in parts. I wonder if that is kind of why it doesn't split. But yeah, really cheap yarn, really easy to care for, and in my opinion, it's one of the best yarns you can get in relation to the price it has. So I would fully recommend that. Am I happy with this jumper? Yeah, I am happy. I wore this a lot and I really like it. In hindsight, I wish I'd made the sleeves a little bit longer. I think I might do them again or try to aggressively block and see if that solves it, but I feel like they could be a centimeter longer or something like that, a centimeter or two. I also made it quite a cropped length, which I think is good for hiking, but I think it might make it a little bit difficult to combine with pants, so I have to see how that goes. But overall, I really like this jumper. I enjoyed knitting it. Oh, I forgot, it does have one traveling stitch marker that travels every second row. That was a little bit difficult to wrap my head around, but apart from that, it's really simple to follow. It's well written. Sari's pattern are really good usually. So again, that was quite an enjoyable experience. I also checked the comments on Ravelry for you, and the only thing I saw was that some people had difficulties with the way that the bobbles were described in the pattern. I personally found that quite easy to follow the way she wrote it, but I think if you're having issues with the bobbles, then there's also quite a few videos on YouTube that you could follow that makes it a little bit clearer for you. And apart from that, pattern had quite a high rating on Ravelry and a high clarity rating. It's not the easiest pattern as you can see from the nice lace yoke, but I found it worth it and I'm happy with the outcome of it. Was it worth trying to speed knit this? That is a question that's a little bit more difficult for me to answer, because on the one hand, I wore this on basically every hike we did. It was perfect for hiking. It's like one of the best jumpers I've ever made, I think. I'm really happy with it. I wore this the entire time until I fell down in a Scottish moor and got some like bracken water all over me, which is a story for another day. But after that it went into the dirty washing compartment of a suitcase, unfortunately, for the last 2 days of the trip. But until then I wore this basically everywhere. It was ideal for the weather conditions. It wasn't too cold, it wasn't too hot, it was just great. On the other hand, I feel like it is probably not the best idea to set yourself a speed knitting challenge in any situation with a deadline. So I kind of talked before on this channel about how I'm trying to slow down a little bit, to do projects a little bit more mindfully, which is also kind of difficult because YouTube really doesn't lend itself to it. If you have a YouTube channel, you kind of always want to put out stuff that is interesting. Like I want to make things because I want you guys to see content that you find interesting and appealing. I want to put out stuff regularly, but knitting on the other hand is quite a slow hobby, so there's always this kind of like internal drive to push yourself a little bit to keep up making interesting things. But I feel like I'm kind of learning how to navigate that. On the other hand, yeah, I just shouldn't have done something with a hard deadline, I think, because I would be a horrible mountaineer if I was, because if I have a target, I want to reach it. I'm quite driven like that. And if I was a mountaineer, I would just get summit fever and try to get to the top of the mountain in horrible weather or something like that. It's also one of the reasons why I like never plan dangerous hikes, because I'm too stubborn to turn around. So I always have to be quite careful with this kind of stuff. But for knitting, it means that I really didn't want to give up on this, even when I could see it was kind of a tight deadline. And I did get wrist pain from doing the bobbles. I am quite proud of myself, because when I did get wrist pain, I took a break and I just said to myself, if I don't finish this in time, then this is completely okay. And I managed to just not do anything for like a day until my wrist felt fine again, went on a hike instead, it was all good. But really, if you knit super fast, you can get like stress injuries in your wrist, in your fingers, and in your shoulders, and it's not worth it. It's just not worth it, because like I could have overdone it by like an amount that would have meant I would have had to take a break for weeks. I would have missed out on most of the like autumn knitting with woolly yarns that I was so looking forward to. And it would have been super annoying. So that fortunately didn't happen, because I did just then kind of disengage from trying to finish it in time, for at least until my wrist felt better. But I shouldn't have even knit that much to make my wrist hurt in the first place. So yeah, I think for me, a better approach for the future would not be to try to finish something before I go somewhere or something like that. But maybe if I do challenges, it would be more like, how much of X can I do in a weekend? Or how many granny squares can I make in like that amount of time, or something like that, with an open end where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I do 5, maybe I do 15. I don't know. I will see. So that the whole competitiveness that I kind of have with myself just goes to the background a little bit, because yeah, it's your hobby, guys. You shouldn't be like risking injury. And I mean, I'm talking from personal experience here, because I did at one point injure my shoulder embroidering. It's this one, but there is like, I'm just going to go into it super briefly. If you're interested, I can talk about more in a future video potentially, but essentially there's the soft tissue in your shoulder that can get inflamed, and it's called bursitis. And I embroidered something through quite thick fabric, so I was kind of stabbing with a lot of energy coming from the shoulder 1,000 times, I don't know how often, and I did not realize it at the time, but it did injure my shoulder. And let me tell you, it is so difficult to get taken seriously if you do a crafty hobby that's traditionally more associated with women doing it, and that being something that can injure yourself. Because I did go to an orthopedic doctor, and he just didn't take it seriously because it wasn't a sports injury for a little bit. You could see how inflamed it was, but he was like, oh no, it's not from the embroidering at all, it's just like maybe you're not standing straight or something like that. And yeah, so I kept embroidering because he told me it wasn't from the embroidery. And then I just realized after a while that it kept getting worse whenever I would embroider again, because it was irritating it and I was getting inflamed. So yeah, it took a while, and I took a break from embroidering. It was one of the reasons why I got into knitting that much, because it doesn't actually make my shoulders hurt at all. And now I can embroider again for extended periods of time without any pain, which is really nice. But yeah, just don't do this. Just don't. It's not worth it at all. But in this specific instance, doing it in a way that did not injure myself, I am really happy. Like, let me phrase it like that. I'm really happy that it was done for this trip. I wanted to finish it because we were going for like friend's wedding, hiking, different countries. So having a garment that's that versatile and that I could also wear at a nice dinner or something like that was really good. It saved space in the suitcase. I felt really pretty in it, and yeah, I'm super happy with it, how it came out, and I will leave you with that. If you liked this video, if you're curious about more yarn travels that are coming up in the next few videos, then don't forget to subscribe. And I will now leave you with a few impressions of how the sweater performed when hiking and me just wearing it everywhere. And that's it for today. I hope, yeah, you had a good time. I'm now finishing my tea that's by now kind of cold. It's a quite common thing, I think, because when you make drinks for YouTube videos, you don't want to kind of constantly keep sipping at it on camera. So I might have to microwave this. Please don't come for me. All right. Have a nice day. Have a nice weekend. Bye.